Okay, so the next job we've got to do, I've got the pistons at my feet here, they need a clean, I'll do that in a minute. But one of the bigger jobs I need to do, which is going to take a minute or two, is I've got to make sure that the gap on the piston rings is big enough and not too big. Now, it's very, very simple to do that. A lot of people always say piston rings come pre-gapped. Yeah, they do to a degree, they can come pre-gapped. But the problem is, if you've got a lot of bore wear, that gap's going to open up. Or if they've screwed up, it might be a bit tight. You don't know, so check them. 2 boxes of rings, you get 2 pistons worth in each box, which is a bit weird to me. But look at this. I could go through the manual, but these new piston rings actually come with full directions on the gaps that you need to be running and everything in the packet. So I'm happy with that. I'm going to have a look here now at what the piston ring gap should be. And I'm talking absolute rubbish because it only gives me the gap in the piston. It doesn't give me the bore gap. But what I'm going to do, I'll take them out. I'm just going to look over here at my data sheet and it'll tell me on there what the piston ring gap is, 100%. Right, now I've put it in the book and cheated. It's telling me piston ring number 1 gap should be, that's the all control ring, yes. This one needs to be 0.5 millimetres and the other 2 are 0.4 millimetres. So, to check that, we're just going to put it in very gently. These will break, so be careful. Work them round, we'll go in. There you go. If I just take that out, we might be a bit better. Obviously when we put them in the engine we'll be using a piston ring compressor. Put it down the bore a little bit and you have to make sure it's perfectly square. Now, there's a way of doing that. Get yourself a piston without rings on it, make sure the piston's flat on the top, make sure it's not a dish piston. And then just settle it in. Okay. So now we're seeing the piston gap, the ring gap that we'll be seeing when it's around the piston. And let's have a look at it. Get the feeler gauges out. 0.4, 0.5 mil. And that looks to me like it's tight. So we're going to have to take some off of that. No. Yeah, so it's only 0.1 of a millimetre, but I'm actually going to file that off. We'll take another look. Okay. So while I do that, I'm going to do the same process to all the piston rings and fit them to the pistons. It's going to take me 2 or 3 hours to do this. So I'm going to do this by myself for a minute. I'll come back when I've got them on the pistons and we're ready to fit them. Okay, so I've gapped all the piston rings now. A couple of things I forgot to mention I think before. When you gap piston rings to a cylinder, make sure that you keep, especially with an engine like this is obviously a second-hand block, we're just freshening it up. I've honed the bores, so the bores, although it'll be the most minute amount, will be different sizes ever so slightly. So when you gap the piston rings to cylinder 1, make sure those rings go back in cylinder 1, because if you put it into cylinder 2, the best that can happen is it might be a little bit bigger. The worst that could happen is it's a bit smaller, and if it's too small, when the ring expands as the engine gets hotter, the end of the rings will touch, it pushes out or pushes up, busts the piston, scratches the bore. Nothing good ends up happening when you do that. So make sure the pistons you gap stay in the pistons that stay in the cylinders that you gap them to. There's an outside wear limit on these piston rings. I believe it's like 1 mil, 1.2 mil, and you gap them to 0.4 and 0.5 mil retrospectively, whichever ring it's for. They were just a little bit tight. Now, because this is a freshly honed block, and because they're brand new piston rings, what's going to happen as soon as I start the engine and it runs in, It's going to take all those little edges off the bores, and it's going to take that running in sort of sharp edge off of the ring as they bed into each other. So the piston ring gap will actually get a little bit bigger when it runs in. So don't go all the way out or even halfway into the usable gap, because as soon as you start this engine running in, it's going to grow anyway. So all I've done, I've made a nice fit at 0.4 and 0.5 mil. Within 20 miles that will have got bigger. So don't go too mad. So the next step, we're going to put the rings on the pistons, but first we need to clean the ring grooves. Now, you can spend hours with, cleaning fluid and scrubbing it, or you can get hold of yourself one of these. This is a piston ring groove cleaner. And what you do, you slot the piston ring into there, the ring gap, sorry, and then choose yourself. This arm comes in, you wheel this little thing here around, see which one fits, and it's going to the smallest one, like that. So you get hold of it, bit fiddly, in it goes, and then just turn the piston around, and what that's doing, you can actually see the crap falling out of the piston ring groove. It's literally like a little cutting tool, and it's going to, you hear that, and then release. And on the end of there, I don't know if you can see it, there's a little pile of carbon and all the crap that used to be in that piston ring groove, which is now spotlessly clean. Simple as that. Really good tool, that. Get rid of all that. It's got like a little wheel with all the different size piston ring grooves. There's actually a second one there you can attach if you need it. So I'll do the next one, slot him in the gap. Don't go in too tight, just hold it like that and spin it round. Honestly, on my leg now there's a pile of carbon appearing. It's ridiculous. All that was in there. You don't want any of that in there, because oddly enough it'll alter the ring gap, it'll push the rings out too far for one. Right, now the oil control gap. So we're just going to, same again, clean the tool. Drop it, there's a little ridge here which is like a guide so it doesn't wobble. Put that in there. Bring it in close. Which one's going to fit? Not that one. That one fits. To be fair, there shouldn't be any carbon in the oil control gap, but we'll run around it and just make sure it's all clean. Particularly like that. There's nothing in there. I'm going to call that it. So, stay there. Blast out any crap that's left in there. A good old clean. And this is that stuff that isn't carcinogenic before it jumps on me back. I'm going to put that there for a minute, and we're going to one nice clean piston. That's a lot quicker and a lot easier than mucking around in some diesel and getting things in there. But you know, the right tool for the right job. So now we've got a nice clean piston, all decoked on the top, no carbon left in the ring grooves. So the next thing we need to do, we can put the piston rings on, and then there's another thing we need to measure. These are used pistons, by the way. They're not they're the original pistons out of the engine. They're not worn or anything, so they can go back in. There's no reason why not. When you put the piston in, you need to check the clearance in the groove, so up and down almost, to make sure it's not too slack, because that does wear. So we need to make sure that's okay. And when I put these down, this one, which one's this? This is piston number 3. I just ended up starting on number 3. So, just make sure that's not going to get all over me. What I'm going to do now, I'm going to get 1, 2, 3. That's where I organised them. Theoretically I should have started on number 1, but because I've got it all organised, it really doesn't matter. it's not going to cause any trouble. Now you can get nice piston ring expanders, and I have got a set somewhere, but I cannot find them. So that was the oil control ring. There's actually, this is a great little setup with this little envelope it comes in. It tells you the clearances top and bottom. It tells you which way the slope goes on the piston ring, so you know which way up it goes. And as well as that, actually on the piston ring it says top, so you can't get it wrong. So let's have a look here. So we're going to go for, this is the top ring. This is a square ring. The next one's got the taper on it. If I look at my little ring on here, yeah, perfectly square ring, just inspecting it. And it doesn't say top or anything. There's nothing on here telling me that this can go, basically this ring can go either way up, which is fine. So I guess if I was being clever, what I should do, I'm going to start at the bottom so I can put them on one on top of the other, because I haven't got the expander, I can't walk one over the other. So let's put the oil control ring on first. Let's be boring. Actually. Come on. Oh, you're going to make me work for it. Now the oil control ring does have a top and a bottom, and it actually says it on the piston ring. So put the cap down there. Again, that does matter which way round it goes and everything, but I've got it marked on here, so I'm not going to get confused. Get rid of this old shell because we've got new ones. That can go in the bin. Bugger. Let's do all that. You might wonder why I've left all this oily. It's because I've not just built this engine in 2 or 3 days. It's been apart for probably 4 months. So the more oil around it, the merrier. We don't want any rust accumulating anyway. So let's put on this one. Like I say, you should really be using a piston ring expander. I haven't got one, I can't find it. So let's get that on. There we go. Be very careful with the spring in here, you don't want to cause it too much trauma. Once it's stretched over there, you'll be fine. And that should just slide down the piston and click. There we go. That's now in. I already know it's gapped because I gapped it. Now the next thing is the up and down motion in there. There's actually a measurement on here, and we can be at, well, that's actually not giving me one for the oil control, so maybe not. It's giving it me for the top ring, which is 0.2 millimeters. I'll check it, see what we get. 0.2 of a millimeter is next to nothing, so it can't have much in it if it has. I guess that's just to stop the piston ring rocking too much. You don't want it rocking. That's 15, 20, 30, 15, 20. There we go. 0 to 0. Will it fit? Yeah, just about. Okay, so now we do the same thing to the other two rings. So look on the little drawing again. Number 2, so this is the bottom one. Now, let's have a look here. This one has actually got a bevel on it, on one edge, so we need to figure out which is the top. First things first, is it actually written on the ring? First place to look. Yeah, right there. So it is actually written on the ring that goes towards the top. So what we're going to do now, these aren't too bad. I've been in the position before where I've had to walk them down cable ties and all sorts to get them on, but these are actually okay. There's an act to it. If you've done a few, you get used to it. Come on, in you go. Put the back of it in. There we go. And there's next to it, that 0.20 that 0.2 millimeters was actually the maximum. And that's, no, it ain't going in there, so that's fine. So if this were to fit and have a bit of play, the piston will be no good. But as you can see, it won't go in. It's not interested. If I put that right up, I can't get it in. That's how it should be. And that leaves us with the top one. So look here, one more time. This is the one that can go either way up. Doesn't matter. Okay. And then when you've done that, you have to position the ring on the piston. And I'll show you how. Pull that out. Over you go. Whatever you do when you're doing this, don't overstress the ring, because these things will break. They're really brittle. So don't overstress them. There we go, get down. Walk it down. Easy as pie. Now I'm going to have a look around for that piston ring expander, because this is getting on my nerves already. There we go, that one's gone. So, as you can see there, we've got the ring end gap, and they're all lined up in the same place. So when you turn the key, the gas is going to blow straight down the side of it. So put them sort of one at 12, or no, let's say one at 2, one at 10, and one at 6. Something like that. Yeah, I might move that one around a bit. Basically get them as far away from each other as you can. And that there is the number 3 piston in this instance, ready to go in. Happy days. So I'm going to turn the camera off now, and I'm going to do the other 3, and we'll be ready to put the piston ring compressor around them, which I've got on the floor, lube it up, slide the pistons in, then we can tighten the rods to the crank. And that should do it for this video, I think. So back in a sec when I've got this finished, and it's looking good. Okay, so we've got all the pistons ringed up now, they're all clean, grooves cleaned out, everything's hosed down. So we're going to use the piston ring compressor next to get the pistons into the cylinder. A couple of things to do. I'm actually going to install the shell into the rod. And if you can see that, it shows up nicely on the rod bearings, that white sputterized coating. It's really worth having a look at that if you're keeping it for yourself, especially if you want it to last for ages or if it's a high performance application. Good reviews on them. I've never used them personally, but we'll give them a whirl, see what happens. So these engines, you have 2 pistons in one way around, 2 pistons in another way around, so make sure you get that right. Sometimes there'll be an arrow on them. There isn't on these pistons. I just made a note of where they went. If you get stuck, just look at the cylinder head and see where the valve reliefs are. So what we're going to do, get one of the shells, same as before, just going to put that in there like that, and it's got a tiny bit of flex in it, and that sits in there beautifully, just like that. Now some rods, and this is quite important actually, some rods will have studs coming out at the end of the rod. Now if you've got rods like that, get yourself some fuel hose and slide it over the top of those studs, so that when you're putting the piston down, it's not going to be scratching the bore, scratching the crank, making a mess of things. But in our case here, these have actually got bolts that go through the caps. We're going to change those, so we don't have to do it, but just keep an eye on that. Before we start, just make double sure that the piston rings are in the right place. Move them around all you want, really doesn't matter. So I'm going to put that one there, and this one can go here. And then I'm just going to rest this piston here for a second, so I need to put it down. Piston ring compressor. I had it a second ago. The gremlins are back. There it is, fell off. Okay, this is a piston ring compressor. There's a few different kinds. I like this kind. For the American engines, you actually get really nice tapered pieces of aluminium that fits specific bores. They don't do one of those for these. So tough, you're just going to have to use one. A springy one. Job number 1, clean it. Can you imagine you've got a bit of grit in there? I've just picked this up off the floor. If you've got any grit in there, you're going to compress it on the side of the piston, and then you're going to force it through, so you're going to put a real big scratch in the piston. You do not want that. Bit of brake cleaner in there, be liberal. Clean it out. the sides of everything. But look at that, all that dirt there. It's just been from when this. Oh, I think probably the last time this put an engine together was 5 years ago. Anything of any consequence, and that's what happens. They just get full of, because all the dirt sticks to the leftover oil. So put that there just for now. There we go. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to lubricate the bore, for obvious reasons. We don't want to be sliding it in dry. We all know how that ends. So I'm going to get my 30-weight, or was it 40-weight engine oil again? Might have been more than that. I'm going to go mad, just get some, there you go. The reason you use such thick oil is because it tends to stay when you put it. It doesn't run off, so that's that done. Just being careful of those rings, I don't move them. And the other thing I'm going to do, I'm going to put a bit in here as well. There we go, just to aid things along a bit. Now the purpose of the piston ring compressor is pretty obvious. So it pulls the piston rings in tight to the piston, allowing it to slide into the bore. None of this messing around trying to stab yourself in the fingers that you used to do when you were 14 years old with your moped. So, there we go. Get it out like that. I'm going to slide it over the piston, including the rings. It's about there. Keep it square and level, just leave a bit of the piston exposed. If you just get the rings by themselves, they don't tend to pull square. So, here we go. This one just happens to be 1/4 inch gasket dry, there are other kinds. Give it a bit of a tweak. Okay. Now I'd say don't go mad, but sometimes you do just have to make sure it's got. If you can still turn the piston in it, it's going to be alright. Okay. And I always find, if it's touching flat around the bottom edge of the piston, they do tend to taper a little bit. So you won't get it tight at the top. When you push down, it'll actually compress the rings in a bit more. So, look behind me to cheat. Next thing we're going to do, we're going to get something to gently tap. I've got a hammer, I'll be using that end of it. We're going to turn the crank so that the journal is all the way at the bottom. I don't want to be smashing that shell against the crank when it goes in. This one's piston number 1, so guide it in and then just very gently. You can see how much effort I'm putting into that, it's hardly anything. And also push down on the ring compressor. The last thing you need it doing is jumping up on the last ring. Make sure it's all the way in, and hey presto, that's one piston fitted. So, as I've done last time, I'm going to do the other 3, but it really is that simple. There's no rocket science there. You just got to be methodical and be delicate. If you get it stopped, don't start pounding on it. Something's wrong, and if you start smacking it, you're going to break a ring. So that went in completely as it should do. I'm going to put the other 3 in. I'll be back in a second, and we'll put the rod caps back on, and put the new bolts and torque those down. Rotating assembly then should be finished. Back in a tick. Okay, so we've done all that. The pistons are all in. The rod bearings are in the rods, but they're not in the caps yet. So the next job, as you can see on here, we're going to put the next job, to answer my own question, is we're going to put the rod caps back on the rods again. Now a couple of things with that. Obviously we're using new shells, but we're also going to be using new bolts. The reason being, they are actually a stretch bolt. Now, if you were to get one of these old ones, look at the middle, it's got the plane in it, and they're actually really nicely engineered bolts so they can't rattle loose. And if you were to take a new one and put them next to each other, you'd say, what's the difference? And you'd probably be right, but the idea is when you tighten these, this bolt actually stretches. It's more like a spring than a bolt. So if you were to measure the pair of these, this one will be ever so slightly longer because it's already been stretched. Now they will shrink a little bit, but you should change them. They're not. It's actually down in the book that these aren't for reuse, so we are going to do that. So I've got 2 bolts here. Let's put the shell in the cap like this. Exactly the same as before. You can't really do it wrong. It'll only go in one place. It goes in especially easy if you take out the old bearing. Look at that. Clean out. I thought I'd done that. Never mind. Clean it all up. Nice inside there. If you take any of these off and there's any bluing in there, if you've had an engine failure, don't use it again. You need to change the rod. But there we go. That goes in like that. I'm going to put I've already put some oil on the crank, but what I'm going to do, I'm just going to put a little bit of oil on the bearing face, just for that first initial crank up with those. So what you do, these can be a little bit fiddly. I'm going to rotate the crank and I'm going to bed the rod into it. Be careful when you do this that you don't push any pistons back out again. That's really irritating. Ask me how I know. There we go. So that's actually lined up for me. Cylinders 1 and 4. Perfect. So on the, I won't get the camera in there to show you because I just can't get it in. But if you look, I doubt you'll see it. But when I put these together, I marked which cylinder it came from. In this case, 4. There's 4 dots, and on this end, there's 1 punch just there. And I've done exactly the same on the rod. That tells me this came from cylinder number 4, and I make both of the dots match. So gently put that in there like that. In you go. Beautiful. We're going to get 2 of the new bolts. I'm going to just put a little bit of oil on those, on the threads. Now these holes go all the way through, so we can't hydrolock these bolts. Always like a bit, because what you don't want to be doing is tightening against thread bind. Shouldn't be a problem, but a little bit of oil will definitely help that. Start them off. Start them off. Take them all the way down by hand. Walk them down, don't tighten one side at a time, so that's up to touching. That, come on. That's up to touching. There we go. Right, so I've looked in the book, and it tells me these need to be 30 Newton meters. I've stepped down to a smaller torque wrench. If you get a big torque wrench and it's not an incredibly expensive one, when you come down to the bottom, they don't tend to be that accurate. I think the lowest setting on that on the other one was 28 Newton meters. So we'll use a small one where we can use it in the middle of its range. That'll be a lot more accurate. So I'm going to pull these in one go. Come on, 30 Newton meters. Lock it off. Off we go. There we go. Now I'm just going to settle these down a little bit. I don't like pulling the bolts straight away. I like to go in even. There we go. And that's tight enough. You wouldn't believe it, but that now won't go anywhere. But I'm confident in that because we have changed the bolts. So we're not tightening a stretch bolt that's going to rattle loose. That's fine. Don't swing round on them just to make sure. If you're in a high performance application using an ARP bolt, what you can actually do, they're still stretch bolts, but you put them in and you measure the bolt before it goes in, and then ARP will tell you that bolt should stretch 0.2 of a millimetre, for example. So you'll torque up the bolt, you'll know what it was before you started, then you put the stretch gauge on it and you'll measure it afterwards to make sure it's stretched. If it hasn't stretched, you either replace the bolt or just go a little bit more. But it's the same again, you could pull this so tight, you'd strip the threads, you wouldn't actually affect the bearing. All you would be doing is overstressing everything. So, because it's in the right position, I'm going to put on number 1. Well, let's take a look. Where's number 1 bearing cap? People look at me, I have these things in a heap, how do you know which one came from where? It's because I marked them before I took them off. That one's number 2, for instance. This is number 1, and that one's number 3. So, come on. There we go. New bearing. Just like that. In you go. Lovely. And the same again, I just want to put a little bit of oil on the crank and on the bearing, just for when we're playing around with it, so we're not scratching the bearings to buggery. They're nice and clean, but you know. So same again, just check the dots, make sure you haven't done something stupid like put a piston in the wrong way around. It can happen, it's really easy to do it. It's amazing, sometimes you can be concentrating that hard, you miss the stupid things. There we go. So 2 new bolts again. That one's just started and it's down to the cap, so just pull this one. There we go, and take that one the rest of the way. So now we're going to do the same again. We're just going to go roughly halfway, you know, this one we're only guesstimating. So, about there just to settle it down, and check the torque wrench is still correct. Yeah, that one's done. And that one's done. Right, so that's cylinders 1 and 4, rods are on, everything's tight, like that, it's gone well. So the next thing, I'm going to turn the crank that way. It's going to be a little bit more difficult now because we're dragging 2 pistons, but it should still spin, but it shouldn't be ever so tight. So that's fine. So how are we going to get those? I'll tell you what, we'll do it the other way. Let's go the other way. Nice and easy. And back the other way. And then I'm actually going to try and get the pistons to come in and meet the crank. That way you've got anything out of alignment like I have, it won't do any damage. Okay, that one needs actually to be a little bit. It's a fiddle. Okay, so we'll put on number 2 and number 3 next, and that's us done. That's number 3, we'll go for number 2 first. So, old shell out. Okay. Well, that's it. That's the entire rotating assembly put back together again. All reconditioned, that's as good as new. Now actually I suppose technically it's better than new because we've used those really nice bearings in there. So I'm happy with that. The next video will be building the cylinder head, and we'll have the cylinder head put back down again. Yeah, and over the next few videos we'll have it built up completely and put back in the van and driving. So sounds good to me. Thanks for watching. Feel free to subscribe, comment, anything like that. Just give me a shout. Thanks for watching.